Hello and welcome to Upscaling Your Brand Strategy Game with New Ways of Planning, a Pharmaforum webinar brought to you by Enavia. I'm your host, Pharmaforum Editor-in-Chief Jonah Comstock. Traditionally, brand teams stored plans and important data in static documents like PowerPoint decks or spreadsheets, leading to a variety of version control issues once plans are cascaded from global to local teams. But this approach is outdated in light of the technology and systems available. Today, the right strategic brand planning process can streamline all brand planning data and functionalities into a continuous cloud-based system. On today's webinar, I'll be joined by Daniel Kohlstaedt, Managing Director of PurpleLeaf Strategy, and Carina Kaiser, Senior Director of Global Commercial Strategy and Operations at Sanofi. We'll be talking a bit about how brand planning is changing, why it's more important than ever, and how to stay ahead of these changing trends. At the end of the webinar, Daniel will give a short demonstration of Enavia, and then we'll close with a Q&A. You can submit questions for the Q&A at any time as we go through the webinar, and we encourage you to do so. We'll get to as many of them as we can at the end of the broadcast. You can also follow along with the conversation and post your own thoughts on X using the hashtag #PPWebinar. As usual, a recording of this webinar will be available on demand to all participants shortly after the conclusion of the broadcast, and you'll receive an email with those access instructions. So without further ado, we'll get started. Hi, Daniel. Hi, Carina. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello.
So before we hop into my first set of questions, I thought I would give each of you just a quick chance to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about your experience with brand planning and brand strategy that you're bringing to the conversation. Daniel, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for having us today. My name is Daniel Kohlstaedt. I'm running PurpleLeaf Strategy for a good amount of years now. And we are focused on pharma commercial excellence, mainly brand planning, brand strategy. And I'm a typical pharma guy, carried the bag, been junior product manager, worked in Switzerland at Roche and at Abbott, 20 years in the industry. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And Carina?
Yes, thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here. I'm Carina Kaiser. I'm currently the Senior Director of Global Commercial Strategy and Operations in our immunology franchise. I'm about a little bit more than 10 years in the industry, working in different functions, different levels, like local, region, global. So I was involved in brand planning now, I would say probably in every function, so I have different perspectives. And so we recently tried out a new way of brand planning, and so I'm happy to be here and share a little bit of the experience.
Great. So for this first section, I'm going to sort of pose these questions to the room. I'm going to let you guys decide who wants to jump in first. So first of all, why is brand planning important? What's the value there? Why not use that budget in some other way?
Shall I start, Carina? Okay. So actually, a brand plan has multiple purposes, but three main purposes, in my opinion. First of all, it builds the story of a brand, right? So you analyze the market and the environment and the product and most importantly, your patient journeys and what's going on. Do all the analysis, and you have to answer the most pressing questions to enable you to make the right strategic decisions, right? So there needs to be something. I know there's a couple of companies out there saying we do a brand plan in only a one-pager, which is maybe the executive summary, but still you need to do all this knowledge gathering. You need to understand the market. You need to do all this, and a brand plan is the perfect place to do this. The second thing, also internally, right? You need to be able to communicate. So when you create a brand plan, most of the brand teams are in competition internally for resources in terms of people, budgets. So you need to convince the senior management about your strategy and tactics. So that's the second one, big purposes. And the third one, obviously, is also to communicate to your sales force, right? So if your brand plan is clear and well structured, and you can get the story across very, very easily, then your sales force is also ensured they know why the decision has been made. They know what the strategy is, and that helps a lot. And last but not least, also your marketing agencies, right? When you have a brief, and Jonah, you can speak about that probably as well. So clients that come to you with an unclear briefing will will be hard for you guys to cater as well, right? So that's the three main purposes. So I think it's a relatively old concept, brand planning, but it is still valid. So it's very needed.
So how are companies doing brand planning now? What's this status quo? And what are some of the reasons we might want to be concerned about that status quo?
I can take that on, at least from our company perspective, or from a company perspective. My experience in the companies that I was working with is that in the past we always did brand planning. I would say probably all of you agree, and documents like PowerPoints. PowerPoint to me is not meant to document or store information. It's really for presentation purpose. So we always dealt with our brand planning in the form of a presentation, in the form of, I'm going to present this at one point to someone. But it's very text heavy, right? There is a lot of information, a lot of thinking process, and a lot of people involved in it. So we continued doing our brand plan on PowerPoint. Now we're seeing a little bit of a shift in how we can change brand planning, making it more of a thinking process. If we're thinking about AI, right, how can we include it more in our brand planning, in our thinking, in the market insights? And this will basically just not happen on PowerPoint. So we're seeing a trend moving to another way of doing brand plan. But as of now, I would say, at least in my experience, since I'm in the pharmaceutical industry, we always did it on PowerPoint. And then once you're done, once a lot of people put into their thoughts, their insights, it will be stored away somewhere in Teams or in any data structures, folders, and never looked at it again. And I think that's just something that is a gap in the way we do brand planning and a miss of resources.
Do you want to add anything, Daniel?
No, I think it's a very, very well summary. And I mean, we've created what we've created for a couple of different reasons, right? And one of it was AI back then was not even the big buzzword, but it had other reasons why we said, why are we doing brand planning in PowerPoint? Because as Carina was saying, PowerPoint is a great tool for presentations, but it's not a data container, right? It's not a database. It's like we see a lot of customers from us, and also when I was at Roche or Abbott or other companies, there's always this dilemma of how can I present, but at the same time store all the knowledge that I have in the brand around the brand, and the problem is you're getting either a very short 30-slide presentation, which is a great presentation, but then where do you store the rest of the information? Or the other extreme is you have a 400-slide deck with all the information, all the clinical data, everything in there, but then nobody will present 400 slides, right? So how do you do the balancing here? And that's why we also thought maybe PowerPoint isn't the best container for your brand knowledge. It is good for presenting, but that's it.
Yeah, it sounds like there's a balance you have to strike between sort of an in-depth plan, but also a plan that people are actually going to read and refer to and use. And so there's that kind of balance between readability and comprehensive.
Right. And every stakeholder within a company has a different kind of need, right? So the senior director may want to have the 5-slide executive summary, whereas the medical head wants to get way more scientific, and there's different needs, right? And what happens is these teams are sitting there and creating PowerPoint slide deck after slide deck after slide deck, which is then in the end, as Carina said, like stored somewhere after the planning period. They sits there for a year, and then next year in January, everybody pulls it out and says, okay, it's planning season again, which is a little bit of habit we want to break.
Yeah. I mean, and that was the next thing I wanted to ask about, is to speak to that timing a little bit about, the idea of brand planning as sort of a, it's something you do once a year versus a continuous process. And I mean, how is that working now? How should it be working? And sort of what's the interplay between the, the tools and the technology you're using and that kind of question about like your temporal philosophy around brand planning?
And I can start with that, Daniel.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, while the annual cycle provides a little bit of structure, right? So you know exactly, I'm planning from January to December, it's maybe not always the most effective way in our industry. It's fast paced, so we're having very, very fast changes. Some competitors are being approved or not approved, which changes eventually a strategy. So I think we need to switch that mindset of going from an annual cycle to a more dynamic approach of brand planning. Now, this brings a little bit more complexity in it because we're also connecting our brand strategy to our budget process, which is annual. So I think it's not just the brand planning timing, it's also how do we connect it with our financial cycles and how can we break this annuality, I would say, in planning like one year by one, and really coming into a more dynamic way of building our strategy, of adapting our strategy, rather than just, as Daniel said, pull up our brand plan in January at the beginning of the year and then think back, okay, what did actually change? It would be much more efficient if there is a new competitor coming in, or if there is a study change, that we can go back in our strategy and say, okay, this changed. So now what effect or impact does it have in my tactics, in my brand strategy, and do these adaptations on the go.
You both mentioned AI in some of your answers, and so I want to just really get into that. What is the role AI is playing here in machine learning? What should it be? What are kind of the benefits there, and maybe also any kind of pitfalls there?
Yeah, you're getting. We were 11 minutes in the talk. We already hit the AI bullet here, which is obvious, right? So this is what everybody speaks about at the moment. So AI is a big field, right? So it could be anything and nothing. It's really depending on what you want to do with AI. But we get actually a lot of requests from clients about, okay, how can we use AI to do a better brand plan, and or what can it take away in terms of legwork from us to not sitting around and gathering all this information together. But the first answer, regardless of what you want to do with AI or any machine learning thing, and it could be a very fancy project on AI, or a simple financial forecast that's done automatically or automated. The first requirement is that your data sit in an accessible kind of structure, right? So in the PowerPoint slide deck, the problem is, let's take Sanofi, right? So Carina is on board here. If we have one global brand in Sanofi, you have probably one global brand plan per year, plus you have, 80 affiliates, 100 affiliates, 70 affiliates. So you have already 80 copies of a brand plan in your organization for one brand for 1 year. If you store this in a PowerPoint thing, and this comes back to what we said earlier, it's not a container for data analysis, right? This is a presentation tool. So if you keep it there, you can't have any AI project. It's very, very simple. So you need to take these data out and put it into a accessible data container, structured, which allows you to interrogate the data, aggregate the data, do some analysis around it, to even think about an AI project. So that's the first requirement. And the functionalities could be multiple, right? So we're already hooking our tool, for instance, to study clinical study databases, and trying to connect a lot of external data sources as well, and then also the internal ones. And the room is actually open. I know that Carina has some ideas of how we could use this in the future. We just briefly talked about it last week. So but there can be done a lot of things if you don't lock your data in a closed container, like in PowerPoint slide deck.
Yeah, and Daniel, if I just may add here, Daniel raises a very good point, right? It's, first of all, the question is, what are you trying to solve with AI? I think that's a question that we still need to explore moving forward. It's definitely like how to get market insights more condensed and from a data lake or a big data source. But then also, how do we make the data of our brand plan to actually being able to get this information, right? And that's not PowerPoint. It will just not happen on PowerPoint, at least not as of now, right? We don't know how Microsoft will develop PowerPoint, but the way to move to a platform like Enavia, that Daniel will show you in a few minutes, We'll bring our brand plan, our strategy into a format where you actually can integrate data, where you can integrate AI. So it makes it future-proof. Whereas now with PowerPoint, I see a more complex way in integrating that. So I think that's one aspect. And then the other one is really like formulating the issue or the problem that you're trying to solve to get your insights from AI. That can be, as said, market insights, but it can also be insights as from a data perspective. Where do you see the biggest growth opportunity for this brand? Or where do you see critical success factors if you have defined your growth opportunity? So it really is, it's different areas where you could potentially integrate it. But the first step is having the appropriate data, and then having your brand plan in a format, or your strategy in a format that allows integration of artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So you kind of have to, it's not AI itself, it's AI is sort of as a forcing function to really improve our data management, our asset management and everything. I want to sort of segue into more of a, we've had it's been a sort of a high level conversation, but I want to learn a little more about your kind of particular experiences with this, starting with you, Carina. To kind of lead us into Daniel's presentation, talk to me a little bit about sort of where you were at Sanofi with brand planning, that sort of led you to seek out Enavia and PurpleLeaf. Like, what were some of the challenges you were having? Tell us the story a little bit.
Yeah, of course. And it's probably not specific to Sanofi, but overall, I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, brand planning is done since many years on PowerPoint. PowerPoint is not made to document, and our brand plan is a strategy. So, and we really looked into something that makes it more dynamic, as mentioned, right? How can we break this annuality? How can we have a better version control? How can we make sure that everybody knows exactly where their brand plans are stored? Like removing the question of, hey, can you send me the brand plan from like last year via email, or can you tell me where it is located? So it was really kind of, how can we streamline and simplify to find the information that we have? How can we bring it to a level where we can integrate data that we have in the future or might have in the future? And how can we make it future-proof in a sense of thinking beyond just our strategy, connecting it with the execution as well, tactical execution, sales forces, briefing. We just talked about briefings earlier. How can we make that easier for agencies to say, this is my strategy, and now I click a button, and then we have the briefing document for the strategy, right? So it's automating a process, and we were looking into solutions that would help us in making it more streamlined. So we, of course, kind of looked at different options that were out in the market, and found PurpleLeaf. And it was very interesting on how they approached brand planning, but we collaborated on the way as well to see how can we integrate it in the current teams. Now, the challenge that we were facing, and I, again, don't say it's specific to this particular platform, it's overall, is that with a change, or with such a change in a key process, there is a lot of change management that needs to happen. There is a lot of stakeholders that are involved. Brand planning is itself is involving a lot of stakeholders, but then you have a lot of other company stakeholders, like maybe digital or your senior management, finance, that you would need to have on board in order to implement it. And I mean, we didn't solve it yet, right? It's a system to be in place and be accepted as a standard tool. I would say approximately needs 3 years to implement, and we're not there yet. So it's a journey, but it is a journey with a vision, with something where you can really see, okay, we're moving closer to the future. We're moving more to a more dynamic approach that connects our strategic thinking with our tactical execution.
And are there any kind of early wins you can share in terms of, where you are in the process now, things that are already kind of working better than they were before?
Yeah, so especially I would say from a country perspective, where we receive feedback that when we did when we piloted some solutions, the countries were very grateful of having one single source of truth, and a lot of time saving, because you don't need to ask for version controls. You don't need to ask on what is the most recent version of our brand plans. So it's a way to kind of give more transparency from global to local. But then you also need to be very disciplined in sharing the information, in giving some context. But I would say that was the biggest quick win, that countries were able to access the brand plans earlier, to really be clear on what the brand strategy is, and to have lesser deviations, I would say, versus global. I would say that's probably the quick win that I saw from the beginning.
I want to bring Daniel in here to kind of, and I'll give you sort of a broad question here, but as we're talking about specific experiences here, what jumps out at you, either with Sanofi or with other folks that you've worked with, things you've noticed that were kind of are common problems maybe, or or unexpected sort of successes with the solutions?
Yes, so I could speak half an hour about that topic, but there's obviously what Carina said is absolutely true. So it is a change management thing. It's not like some out of the box kind of small thing. Not because the tool is so big. I mean, it can be very big, but it is because 20 years, 25 years, we've done brand planning in this shape and form, and now we're switching over. Means you use a new technology for it, and you also do a little bit of different workflows that comes with it. Bottom line, quicker, simplified workflows, I'd say, but different ones, right? So you need to explain to people. Now you don't click here, you click there. Now you don't send this to this guy, it's all automated. So your approval flow is going to be more or less in hand, right? But people need to learn these steps, and this is classical change management, regardless which process you touch in a bigger corporation. The wins, obviously, so the whole idea of this, creating a platform for brand planning, and actually brand planning is only one part of a bigger ecosystem, came actually when I was working in Abbott, and Carina knows the story. I think I have mentioned it in several demos already. So actually, I was working in commercial excellence in Abbott EPD, and I was also working on establishing the brand planning process back then in PowerPoint for Abbott. And my chief commercial officer came to me one day and said, okay, Daniel, I need to go to Southeast Asia, and I do my review meetings in 15 countries. Can you please give me the latest brand plans for our force brands in those countries? And I said, okay, Brandon, I can do that. I can print out 80 brand plans for you, and then you put them side by side. How do you want to do this? How do you want to analyze and get an overview of what's going on in this region, right? And that was the moment where I said, why the hell are we doing this in PowerPoint? It makes no sense to me. So we should have this all in a database. And then now with the tool that we have today, which is only 12 years later, is something where we can really have a review dashboard where you can see what's going on with every country, how far are they with the process, where do they spend their money, that you can compare things together. So that was the biggest, one of the biggest triggers why we thought it makes just a lot of sense to do it, beside of versioning, right? So anytime I do a demo and I ask, what's the biggest problem you have? And maybe it's not the biggest one, but one of the big ones is versioning, right? So you have 27 different versions of the same slide deck, and then medical has their other 27 versions of the slide deck. And at one point you need to put them all together and you're going mad. And then somebody changes in another department something here, so you need to adapt the slide deck again. So we eliminated all of this because everybody works on one platform, not in different kind of silos anymore.
Well, do we have any final kind of thoughts for this section? I want to transition into the demo, and then of course we'll have more Q&A after that. We'll have our audience Q&A, and please do keep sending in those questions. And I've got a few more in my back pocket if we don't get enough from them. So, but just overall, kind of for the folks listening, what do you think are sort of the biggest takeaways that you would want to sort of leave them with in terms of how are you doing your brand planning? How could you be doing it better?
Should I go first? So I can summarize it. I strongly believe in 10 years from now, even 5 years from now, nobody's doing brand planning in PowerPoint anymore, whether they use our system or another system that may pop up. But I just doubt, with all the AI that picks up so fast right now, I just doubt that in 10 years time, anyone will store the data, the core data for products and interactions on a PowerPoint slide deck. I just don't believe that.
And I would just like re-emphasize what I said. We need to think or level up our brand plans to make it future-proof. Think beyond. I mentioned it to Daniel earlier today. Otherwise, we end up like, or the companies end up like Kodak, just thinking what we've done in the past works. But if we're not jumping on the train and really benefit from what's out there already, making our strategy more future-proof, we will fall behind.
Absolutely.
Let me add one thing to this. Sorry, Jonah, to jump in. But one thing is I have one of the examples that just strikes me is, imagine today you would start using a CRM system as we did end of the 90s, where you had your Excel files that you send it around. Nobody today would ever do that, right? So you're all on your cloud-based CRM systems, and everybody get used to it. And I think we're just at this transition period right now with the brand planning and other processes. Not only brand planning, it's the launch excellence, it's early commercialization plans, it's business cases, it's life cycle plans, right?
So at this point, we're going to turn it over to Daniel to give a quick demo. I'll focus the camera on you, and you can share your screen, Daniel. And then, yeah, in 15, 20 minutes, what you need, and then we'll hop into the big Q&A to close it out.
All right. Let me do this, switch it over. So I'm logging into the system. Obviously, I was logging in too long ago. We'll get back on. So this is our development server, right? So the data that are here is test data. So everybody here listening in, trying to get some insights from Sanofi, I have to disappoint you. It's going to be all fake data. You will not get anything. I hope they make sense, though. But I just want to go very quickly through it. So usually a demo is about 45 to 60 minutes to go in all the details. I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. So the first thing that you see here is a dashboard. So forget about the dashboard. It's not that much importance. What you see here is our navigation, and this looks from customer to customer differently. So the Sanofi one looks slightly different. It has also most of the contains here, but it has different strips. And for each client, we obviously build it in a way that it fits their planning process. But basically, you are running to a situational analysis, market assessment, analytics. Then you do some strategic decision making here, and then to the execution. We have a separate part for medical as well, and for access. And the big difference here actually is that the whole team is logging into this platform. So there's not 27 versions, as I mentioned before. Everybody does the changes here in the system, and the flow obviously is the out-of-the-box flow that we have is, I believe, a very lean but very solid brand planning process. There's clients who want more. There are clients that want it leaner, and this is all modular, so it means you can really adapt to it. So you just tell us what you want, what you need, and then we create this. It starts with text-based kind of overviews. Okay, what's the disease about, right? So Jack's disease obviously isn't real. Epidemiology, diagnosis, patient types, all of these kind of things. So we capture in the first modules a lot of information. How does competitor profiles look like? So who are the competitors? How do they look like? What's their information that you can get there? You can create therapies if you have multiple compound combo therapies. We have a clinical profile where you can get some clinical data based in also for all the competitors as well. What about your customers? What customers do you have? What kind of patients, prescribers? So we capture quite a lot of these things. What we also try to do, and this is a thing that happens a lot of times when we get this feedback from clients, is we have the problem from getting the insights and then segue them over to the strategic decision making, right? And what we try to do here is we capturing something like a SWOT, right, already here. So if you go to epidemiology, for instance, you see here there's a little bit of there's a little switch here. You can say, okay, yes, this is SWOT, so I need to name it. I'll just take it right now and say, is it a strength, weakness, opportunity, and threat? And these boxes are popping up all over the place in the plan. And what it does, it just takes away your slide 35, which is called SWOT, and you have the SWOT grid. And now after you've done 34 other slides, you now need to remember, okay, what was the strength, the weakness, opportunity, and threat of all the analysis that you've done before. You're capturing those already while you are in the system, and it's then bringing forward to your strategy module later on. So your SWOT is created automatically, right? So we connect all of these together, and I'm not going to go through all of these things now, but just looking into a few of these elements. So what I want to say is you have the whole brand planning process reflected here. You can do segmentations, and it's not only like the disease profile that you've seen before that we just capture words, right? Like the text. We also create tools. This one is quite an interesting one, which is a segmentation overview, right? So you can create your segments, and you just get a grid based on the customers that you entered before, and then you can value them, and then you create the segments by just giving the boxes colors. As soon as a box has a color, it's getting automatically, you get a segment created. So we try to simplify very difficult processes where teams are struggling. We try to simplify and automate a little bit here and there to come up with good results, right? So here's your segmentation graph, for instance. We have patient flow, right? So we have patient flow, patient journey, a quantitative, qualitative, where you can then really define and design your patients' pathways through the healthcare system, and how many % of patients go from A to B, where do they fall off, where do we have patients that are not going to be in the system anymore, like they're not diagnosed, quantify everything. So this is a nice start for any forecasting that you want to do. And this is one of the things where we are talking about or thinking internally at the moment about, can we AI this, right? Can we get publicly available data sources to generate these kind of patient flows based on what is available in the world of the internet with publicly available data, which will not probably be the 100% accurate patient flow, but it gives you a first start, a first ignition. We also have timeline dynamics, for instance, right? This is a tool. This is in the good old times we called it pest analysis, and but we said pest analysis is a little bit outdated, so let's do it in a calendar form. So we capture all the events that are going on, and here you see we've got a study, for instance, and the tool is linked to the study database, clinicaltrials.gov. You can enter your NCT code, search, and it downloads all the information that is there and creates that study in your timeline here, right? So you can see what's going on in 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, whatever you want. Conferences, new entities coming in. So really, you have an overview of what's going on. And even here, you can say, okay, there's a launch going on, and you see I've already marked it up. This thing is a threat to us because it's a competitor launch, so you can capture this. And also this SWOT item goes then to the next module. But long story short, here we have tools like the zigzag graphs, right? The relative competitive analysis, ATUs. We have tactical plans to really go after your strategic imperatives, which strategic imperative has what kind of tactics. You can then sort your tactics also by show me only the clinical ones, show me only the medical ones, right? And you have your timelines here as well. You can see what's going on through the year. And all of this is to help the teams create easy and yet robust brand plans and strategic decision making. But then obviously there needs to be a little bit more, because you could do this with PowerPoint, not in this interactivity as you see it here, but capturing the data is one thing. The other thing is now you want to present it, right? So you have a presentation mode where the presentation mode creates your slides, right? So these slides are not done manually, they are automated. So you go in here, you change something, the slide updates automatically, and you can have your presentation. Another thing that is quite important to understand is once you've done all your plans, so all your modules, you have here down here a little box called complete down here. To complete the module, it gets a tick, and you see this one is ticked here right now. If you tick all of the modules, you're done with this, then a little button appears here which is called publishing, and that means the global brand plan can be published automatically to all of your countries. So all your countries will get a copy of your global brand plan, and they can localize it then. So this is not sending files around. This is happening in the tool as well. We can have approval processes for different stages of the brand plan. And if I'm sitting in global, or if I'm sitting in the European headquarter or in the Asian headquarter, I can also aggregate my data, right? So I can see, let's compare some brand plans. You see, I've already pre-selected some. The Australian, the Brazil, the German brand plan. Let's compare all of those. So this is what I mentioned before, right? So how do you print out all these brand plans and then put them side by side? So here you can just do it on a fingertip. You wonder why these all look the same. It's because it's the same dummy plan. They will not look the same if it's in real life, but you could see here how much is the completion rate of a brand plan. How's the market overview happening in Germany? How does the market evolution look like? Does Germany spend the budget versus the US? These kind of things. So you have an overview of that. And then also what you could do is you go back, aggregate these data, right? So you can do the same thing here right now with aggregation. So then you can see what's the budget usage, what's the heavy budget tactics for all three of those countries, and you see there's a couple of empty ones. But you get the concept, right? So this is really how to bring everything together, not only creating the plan, but also then what are we doing next with these data? And these data are in a database structure. So there's a big database behind this, and we can API into Viva, into other tools. We can get data from other tools, internal tools, data lakes, to use them here in the brand plan. And brand planning, I mentioned it before, is only one thing. So launch excellence would also be another thing, right? So we are just building at the moment internally the concept of adding launch excellence to this, where when you start your launch excellence, your launch plans, can they then become a brand plan once you've launched, right? That you have a segue throughout and not stopping and using another tool and another system, but having a from start to end in a life cycle, the plans speak to each other, and stakeholders always know what's going on. That's just in a nutshell, right? So let me try to unshare. I don't know how that works actually. I don't know.
To end the screen
Jonah,
share?
can you help me?
What?
How to unscreen share?
Yeah, it should be ended now.
Oh yeah, perfect. I'm back. All right, so that was a little demo. So it's really in a nutshell, right? So you can discuss in depth more details. And Carina knows I forgot 20%, 50% of it. But yeah, there's a lot of opportunities.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Daniel. So we really do want to get into audience questions at this point. We've had a few come in, but we would invite you to send additional ones in, either about the platform, what you just saw, or more generally, just picking these folks' brains about brand planning and brand strategy. So to start with one of the questions we've already gotten in, we're talking about AI, but as our questioner, Louise, points out, Many companies aren't even doing omnichannel yet. They're still stuck on multi-channel. So jumping into AI and Gen AI without careful consideration of the digital maturity of the organization could be rough for product launches, for cycle planning. So what are your thoughts about that? I mean, are we in danger of taking too many steps forward at a time?
Yeah, I can jump in, and then Carina, I'm happy to hear your thought on this. I think this is spot on. This is absolutely spot on. This is absolutely my opinion. The problem with these buzzwords of omnichannel, AI, what was it before? Closed loop marketing, I heard in my career, is like everybody thinks it's the holy grail, but and everybody needs to jump on that train right now. But I think it's very important to first analyze what is the need. What do you really want to get done? And maybe AI can be something. Sometimes there are requests we get where I say that this is not an AI topic because we are in pharma, we are in a niche, and we do brand planning, which is a niche in a niche. And for big AI algorithm training, you need huge data amounts, right? So you need to train these algorithms. And if you have a very specific question that is based on data that no company will ever share because it's a competitive data set, it's going to be very hard to solve this with AI. I'm not saying it's impossible, but first, let's think what needs to be solved, and then let's think whether AI is the right vehicle to do that. And then you can create something, but just ticking the AI box because we need to do AI now as well because everybody's doing it. It was never a good idea, not for omnichannel, not for closed loop marketing, not for whatever you name it, right? So it's always better to think before you jump the gun. Carina, what's your thoughts on that?
Absolutely spot on, Luis. I think, however, what often gets misunderstood from my perspective, I can just talk from my perspective, is omnichannel is not just digital, right? I often heard the discussions about who is now responsible for that? Is it omnichannel or is it digital? Well, omnichannel is not only digital, right? It's really a much broader topic. But I totally agree. First, we need to assess where does the company stands in terms of digital maturity and learn how do we get to at least a fundamental stage of kind of implementing these kind of things. And it doesn't need to be made face by face, right? We don't need to first implement omnichannel properly and then start Gen AI. And by the way, I would also differentiate between generative AI and AI, because we could potentially start with AI or Gen AI before we implemented omnichannel, because it can be integrated in areas where an omnichannel approach is not necessary. Now, do we want that? Maybe no. But I think waiting until an omnichannel approach is being completely embedded in our way of working and then start to implement AI and generative AI, then we lose the track. So I think it's the complexity of how can we make sure we progress and advance both topics or multiple topics at the same time to not lose track of implementation of these topics.
So I have another question just came in, and I hope I'm interpreting this correctly, but the question is, how many PowerPoint slides do you need to generate to gather the information needed to enter into the cloud plan? So with something you just showed us, Daniel, how many slides are you saving?
Yeah. So that depends, obviously, right? So if a client comes to us and says, we have 400 slides PowerPoint and we still want to keep them, we build them in, but our recommendation would not to do that, because you've seen in the tool probably, and this is something that I think Carina had this aha moment also a year or two ago, where it's like in the PowerPoint brand planning methodology, your data storage and presentation is in the same vehicle. Now here in the platform, you need to think differently. So you have the platform that is your data storage. So you can store unlimited data, right? You can create 25 modules on any kinds of sorts. to put and dump all your clinical data, everything, and all the tiny detail information, but that doesn't require you to have 400 slides. You can still go with 10 slides. Say, okay, this is the condensation of this. So in general, to answer the question, in general, we bring usually down the slide monkey work for the teams from way over 100 slides down to 20 slides, because that's totally sufficient in most of the cases.
And it also depends, like how many slides of your slides in the end are, for example, just tactical listings. And I agree to what Daniel said. It's really about making that mental shift of my strategy is a presentation to my strategy sits in a database. So the slides itself will only reflect what you really want to show to senior leadership, or use for a presentation purpose to have it in a, I would say, aggregated way to show it properly. But then if you're discussing tactics with your cross-functional team on where you stand and where you might need to adapt some timelines, does it really make sense to look at the slide, or do you potentially benefit from just going into the platform, open the screen, and go through the full tool you saw it just from Daniel, tactic by tactic or in the timeline, and discuss the specific specificities right in the platform. Now, Catherine, if I understood you correctly, also your question was, what do you kind of need as a base in order to get that platform? That's very dependent on how you want to, or how you're doing your brand plan, and how open you are to adapt to a different process. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. So I think what a learning was from our perspective is as well that the teams need to be open to do brand planning maybe in a slightly different way than they are used to it, because the one that you're following in your company might be the one that the company knows, but there are also other ways to do brand planning. And it's kind of that openness of saying, what information do we need? What information do we already have? And is there an opportunity to gather more information? And you also don't need to have everything in your brand plan. You could link insights, like if you have dashboards from your company, you could link them to the platform and say, you just add a button of saying, this is your situation analysis. And in order to fill it, I take this source and go there and kind of read through it, work through it with the team, and then implement the key inputs that come out of this dashboard. Kind of just as an example.
Yeah, let me add to this. I think it's an important point. It really, we really see multiple different approaches when people approach us. Some come to us and say, we're absolutely not happy with our planning process. People are frustrated, they don't like it. And we know you guys do this for long enough now, so let's talk about it. So they are very open to really change what they've done in the last 5 years. There are other clients come to us and say, actually, our process is pretty okay, so we're pretty happy with it. There's just a bit fine tuning here, but we want to get this over digitalized and get all the benefits of using the platform for our existing kind of planning process. Both is possible. So it's really, so obviously we strongly believe that our planning process is a good one, but we always adapt towards the client's needs, right? In terms of how big, how small, lean the process needs to be.
Thank you both, and thank you for the question, Catherine. We definitely do have a few more minutes if folks want to keep sending in questions. I wanted to ask something that we haven't kind of talked about yet, almost shockingly, is sort of how this whole paradigm around brand planning, how much of a factor was sort of the pandemic and the sudden need for all the data to be unified online and that sort of thing in terms of kind of going from that moment to this moment, realizing that PowerPoints weren't going to cut it anymore. I mean, is this partly an outgrowth of sort of the way that work changed in that moment?
You go first.
I'm not sure if the pandemic really had an impact on bringing everything to cloud. I would say probably it's just the speed on how things are changing. It's more the openness from people moving to more digital versions, because we can't sit together in a room and have our strategy or our documents printed out, do some brainstorming. That just wasn't possible. I think what changed was the openness to accept cloud-based platforms or solutions, rather than it really changed the way we think about brand planning per se. I think it's really just the change in mindset of being more open-minded.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Actually, it's funny that you say that, because it's my observation as well. So within the pandemic, beside the fact that we were just releasing the first version of the platform by then, so we were very early in the development and commercialization. Actually, not in the development, but in the commercialization of the platform. The pandemic didn't do a lot for us, I have to say, because everybody was paralyzed for the first 6 months anyways. And then all of a sudden people got used to it. And it's exactly as Carina was saying. So before the pandemic, we had conversations with clients a lot more about, is a cloud system secure? Is this really, shall we use cloud? And while at the same time, Salesforce.com and Viva were there, right? These are cloud platforms. So actually, the question wasn't really there, but we got this way more often after the pandemic. Everybody's used to working from home, using SharePoint, using video meetings. We don't have these questions anymore today. They're not existent. So we do have, with every client that we get new on board, we have IT security audits. We have to have them, and we always pass them very, very nicely. And we are also on Rapid7 and all the security measurements. But nobody from business is ever asking the question. In the last 2 years, I haven't heard any security question, and that's changed a bit. And now, the boost was not the pandemic. It was more the data-driven decision-making, and it was even before the AI topic came up, but that obviously is now, people realize you can't do some analytics on PowerPoint. It's going to be manual, so it costs a lot of time and effort. So that was the bigger booster.
Carina, you were talking before about change management and just mindset shifts, and the real challenge here, not just the technology, but getting people to stop doing things the way they've always done them before. And we got a kind of comment about that from Luis. But to sort of move it into a question, how do you navigate that? Even when you can see the clear benefit of changing how you do things, how do you get the buy-in?
Yeah, it's a very good question, and it's actually, there is no perfect solution for it. I also can't really say if I've done it well in my, not only like this project or in other projects, because there are so many stakeholders and people involved that I would say that the most effective way is really taking people along, getting their insights, taking them by the hand, showing them that it's not a big deal, and providing support. I think that's really something where a change management can be successful if you invest time in having weekly meetings, having even weekly meetings beyond. It's not really about training, to be honest, what I realized. It's more about being there and supporting them and giving them the security that even if they fail, it's okay. So even if they don't know, it's okay. It's an adaptation process where they need to go through, and they can only have successes or small successes if they try it, if they realize how easy it is, and you can only do that by taking them by the hand and letting them experience it while you're there and supporting them. So it makes sense to invest in that resource, to invest in the resource of having someone like taking them along. But yeah, I would say the most important point, no matter what change, what platform, what process you're implementing.
Yeah, if I may add to this, obviously my interest is not to paint it too black anyways, but I mean, it is one of the key things. And this is, I mean, Carina can speak to that. I told her from the beginning, do enough training and hand-holding. Whether you do it with us, we can help you with that, but you can also do this internally. but ensure that you have the people and you take them along, because it is a little bit of a disruption, right? But we also sacrificed a couple of occasions with clients where people who are on a 20-year-old brand, and they are themselves, the brand team is a really settled brand team, 5 years on this product. They used the tool and needed to do the same task that they've done the last 5 years in a different format, now in our format. They just, a patient flow, for instance, they went through it, they had to fill it from scratch, and they just had conversations that they didn't have the last 5 years because they thought they know everything about the tool. It's like, okay, let's check. Is it really these decision makers? But actually it's not. They were the decision makers 5 years ago, but it has changed. So there's new things coming out just by redoing it and in a different format. And I'm not saying it's Enavia specific. We could do this also with a workshop or something else, right? But that is also where then the people who working in the tool are then realizing, oh, wait a second, this is actually quite good, because we have the time to think about these things, because we don't have to spend 5 hours on creating a slide, because that time is done, because it's done automatically. I can now spend these 5 hours in fixing the fundamental assumptions that I have about my market.
You've both talked a little bit about version control, and the problem on the back end of sort of like too many versions floating around, people using the wrong version. The other, I guess, sort of flip side of that is when it does come to making a presentation, you sometimes do need different versions when it comes to different stakeholder requirements, different country regulations. So how does the platform sort of manage that side of things?
Right, that's a very important one, and actually, what is important is that you can create multiple versions of the same information without alternating the information itself, right? So what I want to say is, in the tool, you can create multiple decks out of your slides, right? So let's say you have 50 slides or 30 slides. So maybe medical only needs 15 of those 30 slides, and you just select which ones, and you create one version of it. You can store it, you can save it as a medical version, for instance, and you have a marketing slide deck that is 17 other slides maybe, right? And you have a different cut, so you can save this as well. But the slide itself is going to be the same information. So the patient flow will not be different from the medical person or a medical slide deck and the commercial slide deck. Because that information is what you want to be very consistent on. But how you cut and how you tell the story, you can alternate. You can create multiple decks if you want.
And maybe to add that is also, again, our brand plan is not a presentation. So it really depends on what do you want to present to senior leaders. And the discussion needs to happen. Is it really the content of your brand plan, or is it something that is coming out of it that's maybe not programmed? And then really differentiating, if I really want to present the brand plan, having it even if you say I have it in the company in the same way, this is what is in a platform that is pre-populated, pre-created, but then you have some specific slides that if you say like 5 slides that I want to present to my senior leaders that actually are not directly coming from the platform, then just create them. But then it's only 5 slides. Then it's not the brand plan plus 5 additional slides. So it's, again, there a little bit of a mindset shift of saying our brand plan is not a presentation, but if we are presenting a subset of our brand plan, let's do it consistent, and let's do it in a way where we can save time, because the strategy is in our database and the slide is being pre-populated and pre-programmed. Now, if I want to show additional things, I can still do that like in the past.
Yeah. If I had to sum up one of the most important things I've heard in this hour, it's this idea of separating these functions of data storage and presentation, and really thinking about your brand plan as a living database document, and your whatever presentations you make of parts of that brand plan to individual stakeholders as something else. We are almost out of time, so I would love to give each of you guys a chance to sort of sum up what you think is the most important takeaways here. Anything you want to leave folks with as the final thoughts.
Carina, you want to go first?
Sure.
I can go first if you like.
No, fine. I'm happy to go first. I need to be careful of not repeating myself. I would really say think to the future and how you make your strategy future-proof, and be open for change. And I know it's not easy, but it will bring you to areas that you might have not known before. And for this, you just need to accept that there might be some things that if they've never done before, just try it out. You cannot fail.
Yeah, I cannot really add anything to what Jonah and Carina have said already. So I think I don't want to reiterate myself. But yeah, I think it's going to be, the whole process is going to be changed in the future anyway. So I think, as I said before, in 10 years' time, we're not having this good conversation anymore. I think this is something that transitions now. Obviously, I need to do a 5-second sales pitch here right now. So if you want to speak about more in detail about it, reach out on LinkedIn, Daniel Kohlstaedt, or Enavia.io. Obviously, you can reach out to Jonah. You can reach out to maybe even Carina. I don't know. I don't want to hijack Carina for being a sales rep. But yeah. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thanks for asking great questions. You will be able to rewatch this or share it with your friends through the on-demand version, and we certainly encourage you to do that. And thank you so much to our panelists, Carina and Daniel, for taking the time today to share with us.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.